Today we're talking about his soon about to be released, as in at midnight, new novel, City on the Edge. Got the advanced copy right here. It's fantastic. David, thanks for joining us today on Bob Dylan's 80th.
Oh, that's right. It is his 80th birthday. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate being here.
Obviously, I'll say right off the bat, I'm completely biased because cop to you and I have been friends for years now, and love your writing, but also count you as a close friend. So I'm not going to be remotely biased in reading your work. That being said, this latest one was terrific. I loved it, and it's a total departure. Those of you watching that may not be familiar with David's work, a crime trilogy featuring Frank Marr, a sniffing detective in the DC area, and this is very far away in decades and voice and in any possible way, really, from those Frank Marr books. So, David, maybe you can tell us a little bit about the departure and set up this latest for us.
Well, I've been wanting to write City on the Edge, not under that title, but for forever. I mean, since my 20s, and I'm not going to give up my age, but I've been wanting to write it for a long time because Beirut was a significant time in my life. And this is not autobiographical, but it is based on experiences. Obviously, a murder didn't happen in Beirut when I was a kid. But I also wanted a departure from, this pandemic era, the whole COVID thing. And I was fortunate enough that my editor, Josh Kendall, not bought it. I mean, liked it a lot and allowed me to write it, and then it worked out.
It's very much, it's more than worked out. It's terrific. I mean, I won't be surprised when it's optioned. And just for a little bit more context, I'll let everyone know it's Beirut, Lebanon, in the early to mid 70s. I would say, based on context, around 73.
Yeah, 72, 73, just before or during the start of the Civil War, the trouble. We were actually evacuated in 74, 75, maybe. I don't remember.
And were you 12 going on 13, the same as the narrator in this book, Graham?
No, I was a little younger, but I wanted it to be sort of, more coming of age. And I think at that age it was a little easier for me to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. And your father was Foreign Service as well. I know you.
Yeah.
All over the map, but
I think Foreign Service.
I love the almost all Foreign Service works at the State Department, at the embassy.
Yeah.
Always a wing.
Under like a USIA, like United States Information Agency, or something, real obscure like that, But I'm sure he was just Foreign Service. I don't know, but that part was incorporated too, because every kid, wants his dad to be like something
more than
yeah.
he's let it on.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, growing up, I know you, and not just in Beirut, but you spent time in Mexico City, kind of dotted around in different far-flung locales. But it seems like in this book, you really have like kind of a real affection and kind of love affair for Lebanon and the beauty.
Yeah, I mean, as a kid there, I mean, I was, well, even during the curfews, I broke the curfews, and that was dangerous. But prior to the curfews and everything, I mean, I walked around in my bare feet and shirtless and just shorts, and I'd go to the Mediterranean and go, snorkeling. You could walk around as a kid. No, there was nothing ever happened to me. There was no danger, and just the culture, the people, the food. Oh my gosh. Alhambra uptown, I mean, it was probably the most memorable experience in my life. And I definitely, I know it's been rebuilt, but it's been rebuilt before, and still the Paris of the Middle East. And I want to go back.
And well, I think, I mean, the way you just characterized it, I think that's probably a very, very different image that most, particularly, I was going to say Americans, but all Westerners maybe have, particularly of Beirut. I mean, I'm a
Yeah.
kid of the 80s where my sense of it growing up was, visualizing this, this city as like, what personified a war zone
Yeah,
was
it was then. Yeah.
Beirut. And,
Yeah.
only later, like you said, the food is, I mean, Mediterranean Lebanese food is hard to match. And
Yeah.
it really isn't a Mediterranean city. Yes, it's the Middle East, but it,
Mhm.
some of my favorite scenes that you talk about is the freedom of Graham and his friends going snorkeling off the reef. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not sure people really characterize Beirut as a Mediterranean snorkeling kind of spot.
Yeah.
Is
There are
that,
those little coves. Hmm? No, I'm sorry. What, I interrupted you.
no, I just wanted you to, elaborate some more on just the fact that it's almost like a war-torn tropical paradise in a sense.
Yeah, it really is. It's, I mean, literally off the avenue, the Corniche, um, the long road that extends, throughout most of the seaside in Beirut. You climb the wall and drop down to the reef, and there'd be little coves. There'd be pole fishermen, with those long bamboo poles, and you just stay away from them. They were cool, but you don't want to mess up their fishing.
Mhm.
You just go into these little coves and you just have a blast. I mean, there'd be nurse sharks, and you can play around with the sea urchins. And I mean, it was just a kid's paradise. It was phenomenal.
And,
And
and,
spearfishing.
and American kids were granted a certain degree of freedom. There was never like a fear of, I mean, I'm sure there was a fear of your safety when you were on the verge of being evacuated, but around
Yeah.
3 or so, you were allowed really kind of free reign around the
Oh
city.
yeah, yeah. My dad was a diplomat, of course, but yeah, total free reign. I mean, we go to Mount Faria, the mountains, and go to, I think there's, well, not I think there's a scene in the book where we go to the Litany River. Uh, that's a hot spot, beautiful. I don't mean a hot spot in a bad way, but it's just gorgeous. And there's parts of that river where we'd camp and and stuff like that. It was a paradise.
Did you ever have, not to, I don't want to go too deeply into certain scenes and certain elements of the plot, but did you ever have a scare at the river camping when
Yes.
storms roll in?
Yeah, except the way it happens, I won't give it up, but the way it happens with the tree actually happened differently. And the way it happened differently was just a little too outrageous and like too like from some B movie, that it was unbelievable. So I had to try to make it a little more believable because what my dad did and the friend that was there, the other father, the way they felled the tree, was totally different, right over the river. I mean, it's just, that doesn't happen, in real life. That happens, you make that up, and you go, yeah, right.
And so when you were was it largely a expat family community? Like one of the central themes in the book was this tower where Graham's all his friends are kind of in the same place, in the same apartment building. That
Yeah,
both was like a sanctuary, but a recurring theme I think was stay away from the windows, and tonight we're sleeping.
yeah, sleep on the floor, definitely. I mean, right next door was a Druze village, um, and then, but it was owned by another family, not a part of that Druze village. And we used to walk through that Druze village, going to the American Community School all the time. And it wasn't really a tower type building. I think it was 10 floors, maybe 8. But there were a lot of French and a lot of Lebanese, and it was multicultural inside the building. Not all Americans, but a lot of American families did live there, and in the next door building as well.
Mm-hmm. So it wasn't all diplomats and teachers at the American.
No, no. I mean, there were different. Yeah, it was just different people that worked oil, and I mean, all kinds of people. And we were friends with not just like I had other friends. Like I had a French friend, who spoke English well, and I mean, and I think someone from Africa, not I think I know, and whose father was in oil. And, I mean, it was cool. It's definitely an adventure.
Well, tell me some more about Graham, the narrator, because I know, we're in the crime genre or the thriller genre, or whatever adjective someone wants to use, but it really came through the through going. It's a coming of age story narrated by a kid who's almost 13, a 12-year-old, and it's set against a much broader context of a literal city on the edge. And tell me a little bit how I know it's in part based on your experience there, but Graham's older. I was curious immediately if it was a nod to Graham Greene, because I've been
Yeah, definitely was.
I love that.
My father used to read like Graham Greene to me as a kid, like a bedtime story, because he would enjoy reading aloud and reading the books himself. So, I mean, and he's still alive, but he left, his book collection, because it was just too much to take with him. He left his whole book collection, including like tons of Graham Greene paperbacks. So I'm, a Graham Greene, fan big time. And so this was a nod to Graham Greene, but also to my father, who I'm sure would have loved to name me Graham, but my mother, wanted a nice Jewish name.
So Graham is so he's almost 13. I wouldn't say he's a troublemaker, but he's certainly not backing down when trouble finds him. So tell me what's the setup where he comes across something he really shouldn't see, and things unravel quickly from there. And from a 12-year-old's eyes, it's a very, very different sense of innocence.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there was this fort, which is not real. I didn't have a fort, but the hill is real. Stinky Steps is real. And it was a very large hill that led uptown. In Stinky Steps, we used to call it Stinky Steps because a lot of times people would get drunk uptown, come down, they'd vomit and urinate along the steps, and it really did stink. But they built away from the step area. There was a thicket, and they built a fort in that thicket, and they hang out there with the binoculars, spying on women in bikinis on the balcony and the Druze village, and just playing war sometimes, just kid stuff. And while there, he witnesses a murder, and so that sort of begins the whole story, the whole premise. And I really didn't expect, with respect to the reviews, that it would be compared to a little bit coming of age, but not anything spy or anything like that. I guess that was the element with the father. But looking back on everything that happened in Beirut now, it's a tragedy. I mean, even what's going on now and what was going on in the 80s and the 70s, I mean, people were dying, planes were bombing Palestinian camps, and just people were getting killed everywhere. It was, but as a kid, there was a certain amount of innocence, and I wanted to capture that innocence. It was more of a grand adventure. You didn't realize the death around, those plumes of smoke, and and the gunshots that you kept hearing, the pop, 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 all over the place. It was just more of a, wow, this is cool. This is an adventure, which now it's sad when you think about it.
When you think about every plume of smoke and every pop could be a death.
Yeah, a lot of deaths. Yeah. In fact, my dad was in his office one time, offsite office. This is why I questioned what he really did. Mm-hmm. And there was gunfire through his office between a Muslim sect and a Christian sect, I think Druze, and they were just fighting each other between the building, and I mean, it was radical, what was going on, and we were a part of that, not part of it. I mean, we were living there.
Yeah.
But you looked at it differently as a kid.
Sure, and there's a sense, and it's mentioned on the back cover, I think very aptly, drawing a comparison to Stephen King's The Body, which I think the great majority of viewers and readers will remember to Stand By Me. But the
Mhm.
King's novella from different seasons with Stand By Me was called The Body. And I mean, particularly there was a couple scenes where, it's a thrill for a 12, 13-year-old to see the first dead body. It's transformative.
Yeah.
I mean, did you expect that comparison? Do you go back and read that novella, or do you try to stay away from it? Sometimes if I feel like I'm hewing too close to a story I really like, I try to steer clear of it.
No, I actually didn't. I loved The Body. I've read it several times.
Yeah.
And I've seen the movie several times. And what I like about the book and the movie is that, the suspense that is built with his body that is never seen, but the thrill of going to see a group of kids going to see a dead body. The difference is Graham actually witnesses it, and then they go back later to find it. But and how the kids, keep it from, their parents, and they're just off on this adventure, walking for hours. Oh no, it was overnight, wasn't it?
Mhm.
In the body to see this dead body, and so that was purposeful. I mean, I definitely was influenced by that book, big time.
But I mean, yes, they went through some near-death experiences. That train track scene is one of
Yeah, it was really good.
and yes, there was a lot of family strife. But ultimately, Stephen King's story is set in this pretty quaint Maine, quiet area of the world.
Yeah.
Everyone's gonna have their angst and their danger or what have you. But in this sense, you're setting the body in a war zone. And
Yeah.
I loved how both naive Graham could seem as a narrator, but also kind of always picking up, it's a recurring moment where he's sneaking out on the balcony or sneaking out into the hallway to overhear the dads talking over scotch and
Yeah.
cigars. I mean, is that something you remember, trying to eavesdrop and get a wider sense?
Oh, that was a part of life. I mean, of course you eavesdrop when parents are having a party.
Yeah.
A big part of it is like sneaking down the hall or going around. We had a wraparound balcony. It was huge, and just walking around the balcony and the sliding glass door slightly open, and just listening to the talk, and because they were all government people, and um, talking about politics, and Kennedy did come up all the time. I mean, even though he had died quite a bit, before that, but still managed to come up in conversations, and just the political climate,
Well, I liked seeing how there was almost a real kind of contempt for the Kennedys in among a lot of these foreign service guys, where I think it's pretty different from our popular conception of Camelot, so to speak, and maybe that's emerging more now.
Yeah.
So this was a family of criminals founded by a
Yeah.
outright criminal that maybe sold his soul and is now reaping it through generations of tragedy.
Yeah.
But there seemed to be an element of defending Nixon and criticizing Kennedy among the dads that your narrator's overhearing in the book.
Yeah, that's fiction, but I mean, yeah, but I mean, they did talk about it a lot, but a lot of that is based on talks between me and my dad. My
Yeah.
dad and I, and later when I was like in the police academy, and I was finally an adult because I was in the police academy. So we had real talks over scotch, and Kennedy always came up. And there was actually this real friend, who had a scar from a bullet hole in his face from Korea that I'd met. He was a judge in like a southern town, and was part of the Kennedy board investigation or something at the time. I don't know what they called it. They called it something, I can't remember. But he was a part of that. So I heard some, in Washington, D.C., not Beirut. I mean, and in my 20s, or my early 30s, I heard some great conversations, but I was a part of those conversations.
So the character you referred to as Bullet Face
Yeah,
was a real guy, and
yeah.
I think Graham characterized it as a guy that spits out a bullet and swallows his teeth is somebody you can learn a few things from.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I don't know if that really happened to this guy, you know?
yeah. But I like that a 12-year-old is that's something that's going to impress a young, almost teenager.
Oh, yeah,
How tough is
definitely.
this guy?
Yeah, I mean, as a detective, I've been to scenes where guys are shot in the face, and that's the, you know, the strongest bone in the body. So, I mean, it's very, very feasible. A lot, you know, I think on one occasion, the guy really did swallow the bullet, you know, and was alive, you know, but knocked out some of his teeth in the process. Swallowed some teeth too, or maybe spit out some teeth, but
So I wanted to also just go back because we're in this pivotal time around 1973. But one thing that I love the way you always kind of were balancing the micro familial drama of Graham is in a situation where his parents are very clearly unhappy, but you're always after the family stuff. You're mentioning the 72 Munich hostage crisis at the Munich Games, and Muhammad Ali is, again,
she,
not giving away any part of the plot, but this sense of him as the ultimate kind of like straddling cultures figure, where he
yeah,
was wholly American, but his conversion to Islam really it's set an awful lot of tension, particularly in the book, but in general. I mean, is that something you remember experiencing?
yeah, yeah. He was very popular there, and he was very popular with us too, the American kids, man. I mean, we loved Muhammad Ali. I mean, um, he was the man, you know. But in Lebanon, even at the time, I mean, he was popular. He was popular all over the world, you know. And so he was so much a part of the culture at that time, worldwide, that we can't really not mention him.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
mean, he arguably was the most recognizable man on earth for
Yeah,
a couple decades.
yeah. And
Particularly
I forget when that fight took place in Africa.
70, it was right in there. I want to say 74, but
Yeah, so it was a little bit after, but that made him even more popular. But yeah, he was a major influence in my life as far as like who he was.
he seems like someone that, particularly later in his life, people tried to claim a little bit in a way that had he had his wits about him a little bit later, I think he may have pushed back at a bunch where it was almost like the mainstream flooding the zone of deifying Muhammad Ali, where it's easy to forget now how polarizing he was.
Yeah, 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 especially to kids.
Yeah. And so, were you there for like when the hostage crisis happened in Munich, or did you get
No, no,
you
it
got
was
out?
it was before.
Do you have a memory of
Yeah, what year was that? That was when was the Olympics? It was
72?
72. Yeah, so we were there. We
Yeah,
were there. Yeah. In fact, there is a scene where that really did happen with figures running up stinky steps, and I don't know who those figures were, but they were all dressed in black, and I know that um, Israel came in, by you know by docking on the reefs from a big ship, and but I don't know if those were the Israeli men or who, but they were clearly running uptown, and then there were the familiar pops, going on, like minutes later, because a lot of PLO people were killed up there.
yeah. And so you guys were you were evacuated like the narrator, where like the embassy just had to clear out at some point.
Yeah, and we were like, my father was actually in charge of evacuating a lot of the Americans, and so um, um, we were almost first. We went out with a lot of Americans, but yeah, we were evacuated by a car and went to Tyre, and then from there, you know, I think Greece. I don't. That part's really vague for some weird reason, because maybe it was traumatic.
I'm guessing it probably was just more than a little traumatic. I mean,
Well, yeah, I mean, leaving your friends just suddenly, and
yeah,
and things like that. There were a lot of families that had to stay back because their parents worked oil and stuff like that. But a lot of the embassy people, they were evacuated. It's not like we were all evacuated as a group.
sure. I mean, well, I'm guessing, there's always the expat community of the American school, whatever city you're in. And it's not like they're going to get the first evacuation. They're teachers that have to be there for,
Yeah, exactly. And I have friends on Facebook who were there through, like through the 80s, and graduated ACS, and not through the 80s, but stayed there with their family and graduated ACS like in the 70s, the high school. And another thing that I found out that's really interesting, and I found out much later, is the Copelands lived there around the same time, maybe a little bit before Stuart and Miles Copeland from the Police. And then also I learned, through research, that Keanu Reeves was a little kid in Beirut with his mother around that same time. I don't know if he was there at the same time. I looked in my yearbook and he wasn't there.
was his family foreign service or educators or?
Well, I don't know what his mom did, but I don't know the whole story, but his mom either met the estranged father there or in the States, but I don't think she was married at the time. But she did something there. I don't know what. Or maybe that was, I'm sure it wasn't fake news.
Yeah.
No, he did grow up there. I learned. I'd love him to, actually, he'd be really cool to, as a father.
He'd be a good guy to adapt this.
Oh yeah.
Well, I see we're just have a couple minutes left. So yeah, I wanted to ask you about, and as you know, and we've talked about this in person over drinks and whatnot, plenty, but the challenges and also the opportunity and thrills of going from a series and developing a series character, getting a couple books in, and then branching off and trying to take that next step, if you will. And two that come to mind, I would consider Dennis Lehane probably the best example. He wrote 4 or 5 private eye novels, and then came Mystic River that set him off here. And Harlan Coben maybe not as considered as literary, but certainly sales through the roof. But he people forget he had a series with Myron Bolitar for I don't know how many, quite a few, and then he branched out into these standalones. But being at that precipice, let's talk about that a little bit. Like it's a thrill, but it's also it's a daunting thing going back.
I mean, no comparison to the authors you just mentioned, but Frank Marr, to me, he was always a character I could only take so far. He might come back in the future, but in a different form, instead of first person present tense, maybe third person or something like that with a partner. But the partner that was in the first and third book, who I like very much, but Playboy, by the way. But I wasn't trying to make a departure so much. It was just, I really didn't want to write another detective story. It wasn't in me. And this book was just really in me at the time. And I felt that, and I had tried to write this book in different forms over the years, and it just never, ever worked. So I wasn't like trying to depart from a series as much as just try to get a book out of me. And I really thought the book sucked at first. And I didn't think I never dreamed that it would get the kind of, little bit of attention that it's been getting, where people like it. I just didn't think it. I thought it was just so simple.
I think it's particularly timely, and it doesn't have to be directly timely relating to a pandemic or anything like that. Yeah. But just, being a 12, 13-year-old in a life that's been turned upside down is something that every parent, we're both parents of girls close to that age, and their lives are, these formative experiences at that age are, this is going to be the
Yeah.
crucible that they remember.
Yeah. Lastly, it is funny how a lot of people have been telling me that they just really, you know, identify with it. The kid thing. Not growing up in a foreign country, but some that did grow up in foreign countries and go to ACS. But ACS schools, American Community Schools. But yeah, I didn't. I'm thrilled.
Well, for good reason.
Thank
And
you.
so as finishing up, don't have to go into any detail, but you got a fifth book and a deadline coming up.
Yeah.
Tell me just
Yeah.
a quick snapshot of what you're thinking.
Well, it's definitely a work in progress. All I know is it's going to take place in the late 80s, like 86, 87. And it will incorporate a lot of the, experiences I had working a club at the time, an alternative music club, but it'll be a PI thing. Other than that, it's not like I'm trying to be, like give up anything. There's nothing to give up. I'm really struggling here. I'm sure you and a lot of writers can identify with that struggle that you have in the beginning. And I'm just in the process of taking a lot of notes and thinking.
I mean, deadlines are a good thing to breathing down your neck, but doesn't
Yeah.
get easier when you get in front of the screen.
Yeah. And the closer it gets, the scarier it gets.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then let's both get back to writing.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Casey.
All right, buddy.
Okay. I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye.